good evening, good evening. I'm Jackie Roan, the Division Manager for Prince George's County's Department of Family Services Domestic Violence and Human Trafficking Division. In several cities throughout the U.S., events like this are occurring all over, like the Father's Day Pledge. These events are designed to lift fathers, father figures in their community while encouraging them to lead and create communities that are free of domestic violence. I'm so excited about this evening's event. It's an event for Prince Georgians to celebrate fathers, father figures, and community leaders in Prince George's County. This evening's program is focused on the wholesomeness of men in our community, their mental, financial, physical, and spiritual well-being. As you know, or may know, when the subject of domestic violence is raised, men are often viewed as the aggressor or the abuser. But we know that's not always the case. In fact, during the pandemic, we have seen an increase in the number of male victim survivors that we have served. You may know, you know that in Prince George's County, we want to lead our community. Men want to lead our community, our families to be healthy and violent free. But we can't do this successfully for our men if they do not have good financial, physical, spiritual, and mental health. We're thrilled that you're spending some time with us this evening and are going to hear from individuals from our community, professionals in their respective areas. And then we'll hear from our Prince George's County Commission on Fathers, Men, and Boys, and the Office of the Sheriff is going to lift a few fathers in our county by giving them the Fathers of the Year Award. So now I invite the Director of the Department of Family Services, Ms. Elena Ballon Butler, to introduce the Master of Ceremony and to thank some of our community partners that are making this event successful today. Enjoy the program. Ms. Elena?
Thank you, Miss Jackie. She is awesome. So good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure to be with you. And first of all, let me just thank you so much for being here with us today as we celebrate and honor fathers and honor Father's Day at our 2021 Father's Day Pledge Initiative. So again, I'd like to thank Jackie Roan for her leadership and all that she does on behalf of Prince George's County residents. So you could have chosen to be anywhere this evening, but you chose to be here. And I want you to know how much we appreciate that commitment that you've chosen to be here this evening. I have the pleasure of introducing to some and reminding others of someone who really doesn't need an introduction. Mr. Mandrell Burks is someone that I met several years ago doing this work. And I've had the honor and the privilege of working with him for the past 4 or 5 years. Mandrell is a radio personality, and he is the creator of the first worldwide domestic violence radio program, The Silent Storm, on WHUR World Radio. On December 1st, 2012, The Silent Storm made its national debut on Sirius XM channel 141 HUR Voices, and it also airs simultaneously on WHUR 96. Mr. Burks is certified in a number of different curriculums, and again, is no stranger to this work. He is committed, he is professional, and I am proud to call him a colleague and a friend. Without further ado, Mr. Mandrell Burks.
Hey, how's everyone doing? Welcome to the Father's Day Pledge. Thank you so much, Director Bellon Butler, for the introduction and the opportunity to be Masters of Ceremonies for the second annual National Father's Day Pledge against domestic violence. I've been covering this subject for a large amount of years, and it's something dear to my heart. The overall objective of this event is to empower men to take the charge in breaking the silence to domestic violence, all right, to domestic abuse. But while you are taking this torch to shed light on this issue, we want to make sure you are okay while you are moving forward. All right, we want to make sure that you are mentally, financially, and spiritually stable while you are walking with this torch of hope. All right. So now the Prince George's County Department of Family Services would like to infuse some help in your walk with helping others. All right. So there's a hashtag that's out there we want to put out there to make sure that you spread that. It's Dads Day Pledge. And also it's hashtag Prince George's Proud. Then there's one initiative that we want to bring to light, and we're hoping that you will support us in it and continue to push this through. All right. We want to register 1,000 fathers, father figures, mentors, young men, and community leaders for our June 2022 Father's Day initiative. All right. You can do your part by registering at pgcdadsday2022.eventbrite.com. We want to register 1,000 men for 2022. All right. Now, coming up next, I've introduced this young lady so many times. She's been doing so much work around Prince George's County and around their community. And so this person really needs no introduction. She's initiated summer programs that offer opportunities for acceleration, enrichment, intervention, and credit recovery for Prince George's County schools. She just initiated the Stand Up and Delivery program, in which Prince George's County will distribute groceries this Sunday, June the 20th at 10 a.m. And most recently, she just walked with the residents of the Ballard Properties neighborhood watch in Clinton, Maryland. So ladies and gentlemen, put your virtual hands together for the Honorable County Executive for Prince George's County, Miss Angela D.
Good evening and welcome to the second Father's Day Pledge. I want to thank everyone for tuning in today as we turn our focus to the National Father's Day Pledge against domestic violence. I also want to thank Majic 102.3, the Department of Family Services Domestic Violence and Human Trafficking Division, the Prince George's County Commission for Fathers, Men, and Boys, the Eastern Province of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Social Action Committee, and my brother's keeper of Prince George's County. I also want to give a shout out to our new Prince George's County Police Chief Malik Aziz, Sheriff Melvin High, and the Prince George's County Council. And finally, I would be remiss if I did not thank all the fathers and young men that have joined us this evening. You are such a critical part of our community, and today we honor you and the impact you have in Prince George's County. Father's Day is a day to celebrate fatherhood, paternal bonds, and the influence fathers have in society. The Father's Day Pledge is an opportunity to raise awareness about the impact men have in maintaining healthy relationships and spread the message that domestic violence has no place in our community. During this pandemic, we have unfortunately seen an increase in domestic violence-related calls for services, resources, and information. Abusers were often able to escalate isolation tactics by sharing misinformation about COVID-19, preventing partners from seeking treatment, and working and even communicating with loved ones. Today, we want to address domestic violence from a male perspective and empower men to create an open dialogue about nonviolent responses and healthy perceptions about masculinity and fatherhood. We are asking you to take action and understand that domestic violence affects everyone and every zip code and every ethnicity, religion, and gender. We want to encourage you to take full advantage of today's discussions, including panel discussions that will focus on the wholeness of men in our community and the significance of personal wellness. And most importantly, we want you to commit to ending domestic violence, not just in our community, but communities across our region and state. I want to thank each and every one of you for participating in today's second Father's Day Pledge. I hope this event is a transformative experience. In order to end domestic violence in our county, it will take all of our collective efforts, especially those of our fathers and father figures. Thank you again for stepping up and answering our call to action. May God continue to bless you, and may God continue to bless Prince George's County.
Well, all right. We'd like to thank the Honorable County Executive Alston Brooks for wonderful remarks. Coming up next, we have brief remarks from Calvin Hawkins. He is the chair of the Prince George's County Council. Chairman Hawkins, how are you? Thank you for joining us today.
Hello. My name is Calvin Hawkins, and I serve as the chair of the County Council of Prince George's County, Maryland. I am so grateful to join with the Department of Family Services in their efforts to bring about the kind of change among fathers that we all look forward to each and every day. This 2021 Father's Day pledge is so important when we think about domestic violence and its unimaginable negative impact on our community. But as fathers and father figures, we can change that. We can be the positive image that young boys and young youth see in us each and every day. The life we live is a life that they can emulate when they become adults. So on this 2021 Family Father's Day pledge, I'm asking each and every one of you, fathers and father figures, continue to do the positive things you're doing. Continue to be the role models for our young and for our community. You are the ones that are going to make the difference as we move Prince George's County forward. Thank you for this opportunity. And I want to again thank those who are involved with the Department of Family Services to make this day possible. I want to thank Majic 102.3 for all of your work and your collaboration. And again, let's knock out domestic violence by being great fathers and great father figures. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Chairman Hawkins. I really appreciate that. Next up, I want to bring my good friend in. We have a host of resources for you that's going to help you move forward in your daily life. So coming up is my friend, Sheriff Melvin High. He's been in the community all the time, always engaging the conversation around how to break the silence of domestic abuse, always engaging that conversation about how to train his officers to make sure and how to protect his officers when they're giving or trying to implement a restraining order. So, you know, it's good that we have all of our council members and all our politicians in one room to have this discussion so we can find the solutions. Sheriff High, talk to me.
Happy Father's Day. Good afternoon. My name is Melvin High, and I serve as the elected sheriff for Prince George's County. And I bring you greetings from the members of the Prince George's County Sheriff's Office. I wish all who are fathers and those who serve in the role of father a happy Father's Day. It's been one of the great joys of my life to be a father, and it is a role I have taken seriously to provide for, help educate, and guide my daughter, and many of my nieces and nephews, other relatives, and children of the community as well. I watch with great joy as her husband now serves in that role to my grandson, Christian. I also see and relish the great maturation of the many others I've had the privilege to mentor and help grow. When I consider how we have started the process of reopening areas of the country, I'm reminded that just last month, mothers were less free to gather and share in the same way as we had additional social distancing directives in place then. We've experienced an upheaval of our routines at work, in family, through our social norms, and with bombardments of information we didn't even know we needed to know. As individuals, as organizations, as a country and world, we have listened to experts, learned and changed our ways to be as safe as possible. The courage and guidance of our fathers during these difficult times has been immeasurable. On behalf of our society, I thank you. I especially thank the fathers who have not abused during the time of confinement and have been steadfast in keeping their families safe from the virus and personal violence. The Sheriff's Office, Family Services, the Men's Commission, and I believe all of our county government works tirelessly to improve our services to our community. But we're not perfect in what we do. So I ask each of you to offer your input to our policy, procedure, and training as we develop these processes, so we create best practices as to how we can better serve you in your role as fathers. I want to remind you that as we work with our middle school mentoring program, I've heard great things about you as dads. Let me also recognize one of my own, Sergeant Richard Johnson, as a best father, because of the great work he does with his own children, but the work he has undertaken with hundreds of our middle school children who are measurably better because of his hands-on effort as well. Kudos, Sergeant Johnson. I want all fathers to know that you're not alone. You have the community's support and you have my support as we continue to improve the environment in which our children grow. I pray each of you finds reasons to celebrate on this Father's Day. Again, my thanks and best regards.
All right, we'd like to thank my good friend Sheriff Melvin Hyde for those wonderful words of encouragement and his remarks. If you're just tuning in, welcome to the Father's Day Pledge, brought to you by the Prince George's County Department of Family Services in partnership with Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. We want to keep you engaged. We're broadcasting live, of course, on mymagicdc.com, and we're broadcasting live also on Facebook, and that's at Majic DC. And of course, replace the G with the J. All right. Remember that when you're tuning in, post your comments. We want to keep you engaged. We want to address your issues. We want to address your concerns. But most of all, we want to provide the tools that you need in order to help you with that torch when you are highlighting the issue of breaking the silence to domestic abuse. We want men to take the charge in this conversation. No longer can we sit back and continue to just sit back and just let our people die. All right. That's why we're trying to recruit you. But while we are recruiting you, we want to make sure we are preparing you for the future as you move forward. All right. You can't move forward if you don't have strength in your steps. All right. So we brought some serious resources to the table. A good brother here, and we're going to help you mentally, spiritually, and physically and emotionally, everything. All right. So coming up now is my main man, Dr. Johnny Rice. I'm gonna give you a little background info on it. His bio is 2 pages long, but I'm gonna break this down as soon as I can. Dr. Rice. All right. He serves as assistant professor of criminal justice at Coppin State University in Baltimore. Now, before joining Coppin, he worked as a senior program associate with supervised visitation at Vera Institute of Justice. Now, if you don't know about supervised visitation, we need that. When you're having those custodial issues, you need a safe spot for when you're doing a safe exchange or visitation. That's usually included in those restraining orders, or if you go to court and you get a restraining order, the parents have to see their kids. Now, Dr. Rice has spent the last 22 years providing leadership, technical assistance, and support to organizations that serve low-income fathers and families in the areas of child welfare, youth development, and criminal justice in efforts to create safe and stable communities. We just didn't pick somebody out of a hat. We knew what we were doing strategically when we pulled these guests in. Now, previously, Dr. Rice held the position of Chief Operating Officer and Director of the National Recognized Men's Service Responsible Fatherhood Program at the Center for Urban Families in Baltimore. I know, I'm not done. One more line and I'm gonna give them to you. All right, get this. He currently serves as board president for the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence. We got all these brothers in here and we're bringing them here for you. Dr. Rice, how are you, my brother? Talk to me.
Brother Burks, I'm doing great, and I really appreciate the introduction. Again, my name is Dr. Johnny Rice. I'm assistant professor of criminal justice at Coppin State University, a proud member of the Baltimore alumni chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, but most importantly, a proud husband and a proud father. And so I bring greetings to you. And let me just say, it's an honor and a privilege to facilitate a panel on such an important topic. Domestic violence. I grew up in a household in which my father was abusive towards my mother, but I also saw my father change and go from a violent man to a non-violent man. And so I understand pathways to change, and I'm very hopeful for our men and our fathers who are out there and those who may be struggling as well. And it's also, again, an honor to be with such a distinguished group of panelists. The title of this session is Domestic Violence, Interpersonal Relationships, and Fatherhood, Countering the Narrative. Today in the media, and in other outlets, we often hear a narrative that is not positive, particularly when it comes to Black men and fathers. We may hear the comments that Black men don't care about their relationships. They don't care about their children. Black men and fathers don't care about their family or their communities. Black men are violent prone, abusers, and other derogatory things that we may hear. Well, today we are going to counter those stereotypes and those derogatory beliefs with the truth. And the truth is that, and the reality is that the majority of Black men in our country are productive, they're hardworking, they're committed, and dedicated to their loved ones and dedicated to their community. Yet, and still, it's recognized that the journey to manhood can present challenges and be very difficult, and without the proper guidance and support, no matter if you're a young dad, older dad, or male, some of our fathers, some of our men can lose their way without their guidance and support. And so this evening, what we hope to do is to really have a conversation and to hear the perspectives of this panel of men and who bring their life experience, their academic experiences, their personal experiences to the table in the space of domestic violence, spiritual health, nutrition and fitness, mental health, financial health. And so I'm really, really excited. Now, our aim is to have an informative and impactful conversation, as was stated earlier, and really to uplift men and encourage men who are listening to us today and share some strategies as well as resources that can be beneficial to them. When men use violence in their relationships, it affects us all. It affects them, it affects their loved ones, it affects the village. And so understanding this problem of domestic violence in the Black community and factors and behaviors that influence such behavior is vital. Now, I know Brother Burks was laughing about my bio. If I read the bios for our distinguished panelists today, we will be at the end of the program. And so I'm going to give a quick snapshot of these men. And let me just say, these men are mentors, they're husbands, they're proud parents, they're men of achievement. And so I'm going to start with Dr. Johnny Parker. Dr. Johnny Parker is the Director of Counseling and Men's Ministry at First Baptist Church of Glenarden in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. As an executive coach and keynote speaker and adjunct professor of Johns Hopkins University, Dr. Parker helps pro athletes, CEOs, ministry leaders, and high achievers experience authentic success by viewing their life as a story, so they flourish in what matters most. He's been nationally recognized and working with professional sports teams throughout the country. He's a proud father, and he's going to be giving us this evening the spiritual health perspective. Welcome. Next, we have Dr. Spencer Simmons. Dr. Simmons is a clinically licensed and board certified supervisor who earned a master's in social work and a doctor of philosophy and social work from Howard University. Dr. Simmons has over 20 years of social and behavioral health management experience. Currently, he serves as director for an outpatient mental health center and psychiatric rehabilitation program in Maryland. And Dr. Simmons will be providing the mental health perspective in our dialogue today. Welcome, Dr. Simmons. Next, we have Clarence Clay Goldsboro. Clay is currently a partner at First Financial Group. Clay joined FFG in 2012 and has consistently been one of its top financial advisors, winning numerous awards and industry recognition. Clay is the first advisor in FFG's history to achieve the status of Chairman's Counsel. Further, he is the first African American to achieve Chairman's Counsel in Guardian's 153-year history. And Clay will be providing a financial health perspective in our discussion today, and he is married and a proud papa as well. And next we have Mr. Eric Walker. Mr. Walker is a contract specialist with the Department of Defense, and in his role, he helps execute facility support contracts in excess of $200 million in the U.S. Navy's Operations and Maintenance Division. Prior to his current role, Mr. Walker held a role of business intelligence consultant at MedStar Washington Hospital. And there he supported the finance department and identified areas for revenue growth and overall performance improvement. His background in education is in the area of health services administration. He is a health enthusiast, and of course, he will be providing insight as it relates to nutrition and fitness. So I just want to first and foremost welcome you distinguished gentlemen and brothers. And it's an honor for me to have the opportunity to talk to you this evening. Now, in setting the stage, I want to first hear from each of you, and we're going to start with Dr. Parker. And I have an overarching question that speaks to why we're here today. And, you know, our listeners may feel this way. People watching may be asking themselves this question, and I'm going to ask it to you, gentlemen. And we'll start off with Dr. Parker. Why should we care about domestic violence in our community? And more specifically, the impact it can potentially have on our families. Why should we care about this issue? Dr. Parker?
We should care about it because relationships matter. Relationships are important. We've been created in the image of God, and humanity, and relationships matter. And it's not okay to dehumanize, to diminish someone's value and worth by being verbally abusive, by being physically abusive, emotionally abusive. And so relationships matter. We were created to love, to be in community, to be in relationships with each other, to help each other flourish spiritually, physically, emotionally, relationally, mentally, and financially.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. And Dr. Simmons, your thoughts?
Thank you, Dr. Rice. From a mental health perspective, we should care about domestic violence as it impairs and negatively impacts the health and well-being of the perpetrator, survivor, and children, as well as those in the extended family system and the larger community. Also, domestic violence normalizes toxic masculinity and aggression as forms of conflict resolution, while displaying authority through control. In addition, domestic violence often fosters generational perpetrators and individuals who pursue abusive relationships because they've learned to falsely believe that violence equals love. Finally, it undermines the self-worth and confidence of the survivor, who is often manipulated into assuming responsibility for the abuser's anger and violence. Survivors' mental health often suffers as they agonize in silence, either out of fear, loyalty, or to protect the children.
Thank you, Dr. Simmons. And Brother Walker, your perspective.
Thank you, Dr. Rice. Domestic violence is never a great situation, whether it be the perpetrator or on the victim's end. We have to take this seriously because domestic violence creates cycles. And in some environments, we might call that generational curses. And the impact of this is significant beyond just the direct outcomes of depression or PTSD. Some of the things that we may hear about frequently, it also has other impacts that are unintended, meaning nutritional impacts, health impacts, wellness. Depression could be a symptom of what one may have gone through, and all that plays a significant role on the life outcome, specifically in the Black community.
Thank you, Brother Walker. And Brother Goldsboro, how do you see this? Why should we care? I think you're on mute.
The three panelists before me summed it all up quite eloquently, I think. It's a circumstance where everyone loses. And that means the as you mentioned earlier, the perpetrator, the victim, but also those that are surrounded by it, meaning the children, if there are children involved. And it's not just the physical impact, but it's also the not just the mental impact, it's also subconsciously how it plays itself out down the road in future relationships, as the gentleman alluded to earlier. So to not care about it is to overlook such a significant problem that you continue to allow this to fester and go on for generation after generation. So it's a critical issue in our community, and it's wonderful that and a blessing that we're all taking the time to address it this evening.
No, thank you. And I think one of the things that's interesting is you all said, it's the cycle and how, we can, if we ignore it, it's something that will continue and be harmful within our community. And so we know that it's important that we, based on what you all have shared, a litany of reasons why we should be invested, right, in this problem, addressing this problem of domestic violence. And looking at the individual man, the father, the boyfriend, what unique societal challenges and influence do Black men and fathers face today that can lead to toxic behavior and contribute to domestic violence? So what I'm saying is, for example, there's a lot of different things we're exposed to as children. We may have been exposed to a relationship that was unhealthy. And so we see things and we learn from what we observe. And I'll start with Dr. Parker. What societal challenges or influences do Black men and fathers face today that could be adverse to healthy masculinity?
Sure, certainly what we see growing up in our families, just that alone, and then of course you go into the wider culture and the microaggressions that we face going into the workplace, and what's happening even with the tension with brown and Black men and policing, and so just even my story is very similar to your story, Dr. Rice. I grew up in watching this in New York City with my father, who was raised to come up from Alabama, that if a woman did not submit to you, it was okay for you to put your hands on her. The problem was he came up with Alabama with that color purple kind of thinking. My mother was from Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, and she said, we don't play that in New York. We don't play that anywhere. And so I grew up just watching that in my family. And then of course, again, just the family dynamics alone, and then just what we hear about the culture, that just the way boys are raised, a little girl can fall down and scrape her knee. It's okay for her to cry. A little girl can fall down. A little boy fall down. He can have a broken leg, bone protruding, bleeding profusely. He better not cry. So he gets shamed. You're a punk, you're a faggot, you're a sissy. He gets shamed early in life. So now he's 20, 24 years old, and he doesn't know how to process his emotions. Makes me want, Marvin Gaye said it, makes me want to holler, throw up both my hands. And so whatever a man doesn't talk out, whatever he doesn't talk out, he will act out, or the emotions will get buried alive, which leads to a lot of the toxic masculinity that we see.
Thank you. And I'm going to go pivot back to Clay. Brother Goldsboro, what are your thoughts? What do you think are some of those things that adversely influence men, that can external things that can impact them to do things or influence them in a way that's just not good?
Well, given my profession, I see a lot of stress that's induced by financial struggles. And when you have a feeling of either hopelessness or an inability to directly change your financial circumstances, you can take that home to your family. And again, as is just mentioned, act out in a way that you simply should not. And men are taught, if not wired, to be providers and hunter gatherers. And as you go out and you try to be that in which you believe yourself to be or are, and you don't reach your goals and or you fail, and you come home feeling sort of emasculated, whether it's your fault or not, and circumstances in society can impact us obviously and hold us back, yet we strive to achieve and overcome. But if you take those things home and you're not able to talk them through with your significant other, it can be problematic. And in that ability to verbalize it, have understanding and comfort around it from your spouse would be helpful. But that's not often what happens. You feel such depression around it or such an adverse effect from it that you then take it out on the person that you're closest to. And that is simply wrong on every level, but that's often what happens. And so, to the extent that we can have these discussions and make people aware of it, awareness is a big part of moving forward and then taking the right action to get in a better position.
Thank you, Brother Goldsboro. Now, I had mentioned at the beginning of our panel, the emphasis on, changing or the counter narrative, right, to some of the negative things that we see and hear. And I'm getting ready to come to you, Dr. Simmons, to start us off. But how can we counter these narratives, the negative narratives, and uplift not only Black men and fathers, right? Because, we're moving into Father's Day, but we may also have some young men, right, who may be listening in with their families or by themselves to our communication and messages today. And how can we counter the narrative and uplift Black men and fathers and not forget the upliftment of our young boys? Dr. Simmons.
Thank you, Brother Rice. We can reinforce the strength, the resilience in our history of survival and success as Black men. We can mentor our Black men and youth while creating safe spaces to share our individual and collective experiences. We can continue to provide men and boys examples of Black men, both locally and nationally, who have achieved. We provide the opportunities to Black men and youth in our various fields of endeavor, and we can publish, document, and provide ongoing discourse across multimedia platforms such as today about the accomplishments of Black men.
Thank you, Dr. Simmons. And now I'm going to pivot the same question to Brother Walker. And Brother Walker, I have gray hair, so I'm a little older. You look like you might be the youngest of our group. I could be wrong, but you probably see it from still have your hand connected to some of the younger men, but also you're amongst men your age and older men as well. How can we counter this narrative and uplift Black men of all different spaces and generations?
Thank you, Dr. Rice. Well, first and foremost, I think we have to meet these individuals where they are. Everybody may not be in a place where they have grown up to see a stellar example of what a man should be, let alone a Black man. So I think we have to meet them where they are, remove the judgment, presumptions, and try to be sort of a big brother to them, or in other words, a mentor, a guide, lead by examples to show them the way. I think we are doing a great job, but of course, there's more work to be done. I am in a unique position where, my wife and I talk about this all the time. We grew up and we were the generation where computers really took off, right? And so we're in this nice position where we're still in touch with the baby boomers. We understand, the music they listen to, what really, they went through in terms of the riots and all that. So we can sort of connect with them on that. Although we weren't living, we still learned about that in our history, and our parents shared those stories with us. But I'm also in a position where I can't, like you said, reach to these younger individuals who are, really into the music and really still learning who they are, and maybe aren't in a position where they're thinking about marriage, possibly because of domestic violence, and it's created a cycle where they're now reluctant to enter into that kind of relationship with someone because of that traumatic experience. But I think we have to meet them where they are and really put ourselves in a vulnerable position to connect with them, because I think ultimately that's the best way to do it, and that is the most effective way.
No, I appreciate you sharing that, because it's very easy to look and see, I think, a brother or a man struggling and say, hey, I'm glad that's not my situation. I don't have anything to do with that, or I don't see the benefit of helping that person. But when and I've worked in the community with fathers, and when you meet people where they're at, you don't think of it from a deficit perspective, but you look at it from an asset-based perspective. You look at what do they bring to the table? How can you insinuate those positive qualities? So I appreciate you sharing that. And you mentioned something else that's moving me to our next question. And I'm going to send this to Brother Goldsboro and Dr. Parker. You mentioned, Brother Walker, what it takes, to be a man. You touched on that. And so the question I have, and this can go to Mr. Goldsboro next, is from your perspective, what does it mean to be a man today in a world that is very hostile on many different fronts to everyone, not just men, but women, everyone, right? And also, we're in a society that's changing, right? So, you have to be able to turn your head to deal with one crisis or one situation, turn your head to deal with another. What does it mean to be a man today in a world that is hostile and steadily changing?
So, first and foremost, I had an unfair advantage. And that my father was an incredible role model. I as a junior, I still strive to live up to what he represented and did for me and my family. So, and I'm certainly not there yet. I may be halfway there. I'm working on it. But so I had an advantage because every day I saw what it was to be a strong man, father, and husband. That's number one. Number two, I think it is, and this is just an opinion, but I think it is easier to be to answer your question, a man today than it was 50, 60, 70 years ago. More overt oppression without consequence and those kinds of things. Talk about stressors. I still to this day don't know how they live through it. So I think it is, I'll say easier, certainly different today in many respects in terms of being a man, but it's the same fundamentals. I don't know that they change. You treat people well. You start with your spouse and your kids, and you provide for them in the best way that you can, financially, spiritually, emotionally, etc. And I don't think it's that complicated, and I don't think it's necessarily adjusted over time. I think you simply treat people well, treat your family well, and do the right things, quote unquote. And more often than not, good things happen. I think when we're struggling and under extreme pressure, sometimes that makes us, or we allow it to change our behavior, and because we want to accomplish X. And when we don't, again, as I mentioned earlier, we often take that frustration, that what I would call temporary failure or transition, home to our families. So that's what we really need to overcome. And I say don't want to be too repetitive here, but it hasn't changed in my view, what it means to be a man today and what it meant to be a man 50 years ago. We need to stick to the fundamentals of doing what we know to be right and doing the things that we were taught to do. And if we were simply to do that, I think not only with the men, but all of our families would be in a much better position.
Thank you. I appreciate that, good brother. And Dr. Parker, I know that, in your work of being, of course, being a man who works in the church and a man of faith, and also someone who's traveled and spoke to people, men from all walks of life, socioeconomic strata. You've seen a lot and you've done a lot. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, and plus I've grown up in a family with 11 guys, and I have 3 sons myself. And so here's the deal. Every man has a front stage and a backstage, and his front stage is his public self, it's career, it's work, it's productivity, it's his health, it's his body. So that's the front stage. That's the world that people see. That's how he shows up. and that matters. The key thing in terms of being a man is what happens in the backstage. And it starts at a core level. I got this core water bottle that constantly reminds me, this is my core. So it starts with my soul. And when I say your soul, it's the deepest part of who you are as a man. It's where a man asks the question, who am I? What do I want? Why do I want it? Jason Bourne tore up most of Europe trying to figure out his Bourne identity. And so his backstage is the core of a man. In the backstage, a man is called to be a man of humility. A man is called to be a man of service. He's to be a servant leader, a servant. And so as a man, I am called to enter into the, you talk about narrative, Dr. Rice. Yeah, I am called to enter into the narrative of my wife of 32 years, the narrative of my 3 sons, 29, 25, 24. I'm called into the narrative of the men in my community as I serve. I'm called to enter into the narrative of when I go to work in the business community or the sports community. And I'm called to enter into that narrative, leaving others better off than how I found them. That's the heart of a man. It's being a servant. It's impacting in a positive way. Now, to do that well, he's got to have his backstage, metaphorically speaking, he's got to be whole back there, because his backstage will govern, inform, and sustain who he is on the front stage. And so what I teach at Hopkins is what's called positive psychology. And that's how do people have human flourishing and thriving. And that happens through simple things like backstage, a man practicing gratitude. Gratitude is a mood booster. And so practices like that, keeping a journal, these are backstage practices to sustain a man. So when he shows up in the front stage, when he has stress, when he has to deal with microaggressions, when he has to deal with trauma and grief, and the 2020 storyline of pandemic and pivots and protests and politics, he's got strength because he's grounded and anchored in what's happening in his backstage from service, humility, and love.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. And, you said some powerful things. And, I know from some of my own experience as a younger man, when I saw my father make his transition to a nonviolent man, and he spoke in public about the abusive behavior that he used to subject the family to, I was proud of him in his accountability, being accountable. And I think that when men can also get to that place of accountability, it can be very, 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 very powerful. Now, Dr. Simmons, I'm going to come to you because, we talk about what does it mean to be a man in this changing world, and some of those changes that we see are connected to social, racial injustice. We see issues with law enforcement. We see issues with violence. We see issues in our homes and in our families. And so I guess, all of this, even to the average brother, can be traumatic to carry that, even if not directly, indirectly, right? It may not be something that happens directly to me, but it could be something that my son's going through or my daughter's going through. How do we as men and fathers cope when it feels like there's so much pressure externally that's kind of coming down on us, and we can't ignore it because we feel it?
That's $1 million question, Brother Rice. One of the things that I was thinking about when the other brothers were talking about the backstage was understanding that even though we're constantly misrepresented and misunderstood, underestimated, and considered harmful stereotypes, but there are other individuals that have walked in our footsteps and are walking in our footsteps that are there to help, that we're not the only ones experiencing such things. There's outlets such as individuals on this panel. There's resources in the community that are available to help, to guide us and to enlighten us. So I think developing that resilient armor is showing that the resolve of the Black man isn't to suffer in silence, but to be willing to reach out and to connect to the resources, or for the resources such as on the panel, to take that initiative to reach out to those struggling brothers and help to give them a lifeline of hope.
No, I appreciate that, Brother Simmons. And, you know, it's true. I think that even the strongest of men, right, can feel alone and overwhelmed by life circumstances. And as you all mentioned earlier, you know, there could be relationship issues, financial issues, health issues. And so we find that our brothers, our fathers are in some instances looking for ways to be able to cope. And the negative aspect can be, you know, using illicit substances or abusing legal substances. And, you know, so we there's a recognition of this, particularly with a period of coming out of a pandemic and the effect that that can also, it's like compounded stress this on men. So we've talked about some of the problems, right? You know, that men face, some of the influences that can move them in a negative space. What do we do when we see that brother struggling, making some bad moves? What do we do when we see our brother or that father who we may know, who's a friend or family member, or we may not know, who's a stranger? How do we communicate with that man, be it if he's younger brother, older father? How do we, in a safe way, engage that brother to say, or that father to say, hey, you're going down the wrong path, and you're making some mistakes. And I'm going to pivot to Brother Walker, because again, you bring that diverse lens, as you mentioned earlier, and being able to look across the field.
Thank you, Dr. Rice. Certainly. I think it ties back to what I said. You know, we have to approach people in love, and it resonates. We have to eliminate presumptions, any negative thoughts that we may have about this person. Everybody's circumstances are different. It's easy to judge if you see two couples arguing in public and the guy gets a little violent. It's easy to judge, and honestly, it's easy to mind your own business and keep walking. But my wife and I, you know, we were well, more so my wife. I caught her listening to uh, some situation with Monique, the comedian. Now this is a side. This is a side topic, and I won't dive too deep in it. But I'm making a point. She made some comment about some woman on social media, I guess, with a bonnet, and it got blown up. Right, everybody found out about it, and some people jumped on her case about it. But it turns out her statement was she was trying to help the girl. She was trying to be sort of a big sister to her, and basically encourage her to carry herself a certain way in public, um, because she had someone talk to her early in her career, and it really helped her make it to where she is today. And I think if we, as Black men, learn to maybe not mind our business to some degree, depending on the circumstance, we may have these moments where we can impact somebody's life, even if it's a small conversation. You may not see the change then and there, but that encounter may make a big difference. It could be just something as simple as offering a listening ear, maybe asking if that person needs some help or if everything is okay. You never know, but I think approaching somebody in love, uh, offering a listening ear before you're quick to speak, and maybe inviting them to some type of fellowship. Um, I'm going to wrap it up, but I attend First Baptist Church of Glenarden, and we have several ministries. One ministry, if you're in the Prince George's County, is Men Connecting in Christ, and it's a great environment for all men of all ages to have great conversations. It doesn't matter what the topic, anything you could think of, it's been discussed. It's just a safe space for only men, and we can talk about these things that bother us, whether it be a loss of job, infidelity in a marriage, whatever it is. We talk about it and we work together as men to find a solution. So if we take opportunities like that, I think we can be effective.
You make an interesting point, Brother Walker. You know, we hear this term often about influencers in society, and we all, in our own unique way, have influence. When I work with fathers, and we had support and curriculum groups, and we were around the circle, we had fathers who were leading and facilitating some of those groups who may have used violence in the past in their community, domestic violence, community violence, but they were able to change. And having those men in the circle modeling healthy behavior and talking about the change process and staying committed to be nonviolent, that was powerful for other men in that circle who potentially were still using violence and we weren't aware of it. So you make a excellent point. When examining health disparities, because I'm kind of pivoting here, because we talk about the wellness of our men and of our fathers. Unfortunately, health is an area where many instances Black men are at the bottom of the totem pole, and in comparison to other racial ethnic groups, Black fathers often have a shorter lifespan. And so, what strategies and activities can we adopt that lend to optimal health and well-being? And I'm going to go back to Dr. Simmons, because is there I may not be able to tap into all of the resources because maybe I don't have the income or the health plan. What are some things that someone can do who may want to improve their mental as well as physical health? And Brother Walker, I'm going to come back to you on the physical health. But what are some self-care things, Dr. Simmons, that you think a father can do, or some resources he should tap into?
Thank you, Brother Rice. And as a father of twin 9-year-old girls, I think self-care has become a daily routine. It's part of my life. And part of it is carving out the time for yourself and making yourself and that care for self a priority. We often, as fathers, as Black men, place career, we place all kinds of responsibilities in front of how we're caring for our mind, body, spirit, and soul. But identifying what pro-social activities there are available to relieve stress. So it could be meditation, it could be exercise, it could be reading or listening to music. I think one of the brothers mentioned journaling, coming up and tracking goals or connecting with friends that uplift you. I mean, having an accountability partner, somebody that, when you reach out and say, hey, I'm struggling, isn't going to say, hey, let's hit the bar, but let me lift you up in love and kind of help get you back in the right direction.
Thank you, Brother Dr. Simmons. And Brother Walker, again, you're kind of on this panel, the fitness guru, right? And so, what are some of those things that that men and fathers can do, and as well, things they can do with their partner and their significant other, as well as their children?
Certainly. I think Dr. Simmons made some great points, but I think to add to that, I mean, there's a lot of different things that we can do besides going to a gym to lift weights. We can go for walks. Me and my wife and my 9-month-old, we go for walks in the neighborhood. It's something that gives us a chance to bond as a family, and it's good cardio, right? Even if you're older in age and maybe you have some limitations, simply vacuuming. I looked that up. Vacuuming, you can burn a good amount of calories vacuuming with an uphill vacuum. So just there's creative ways that we can get fit, get our heart racing. But I'll also add nutrition goes hand in hand with fitness. It does us no good to work out only to leave nutrition off the table. Get this. What if I told you we had two brains theoretically? Of course, we have the brain in our head, but our gut is also considered a second brain. And by the type of food we eat, we can influence our mood. If we're eating healthy foods, that food can break down into basically communication it's a way for our body to communicate with our mind and influence our emotions through good bacteria. So as we eat whole foods, vegetables, legumes, beans, all this stuff creates good bacteria. And this good bacteria sends good messages to our mind So guess what? It influences good thoughts, healthy moods. And so it may not stop domestic violence, but food and fitness certainly plays a key role in our decisions. Something that may have taken us off the cliff to explode at our wife or our child, we may have a second thought and be like, you know what? It's really not that serious. I ate my bananas and I had some raisin bran today, so I feel great. So our food certainly influences how we respond to things. So I'd like to just leave it with that.
No, Brother Walker, I appreciate that. I know that when I worked and our team worked years ago in a responsible fatherhood program, through our curriculum, we would discuss all of these different key areas that each of you all represent, from health to finance to mental health to spirituality, because we're talking about wellness, right? And doing things that are what you would consider pro-social, right? The things that you all are mentioning fit into that category, and sometimes exposure, because it may sound corny to some brothers, but then when you sit down and you kind of break it down for them, go through some exercises, take them to a healthy food market, those things start to stick. When they look at an app and start walking and say, hold up, what is this? But then they start tracking and say, oh, okay, I see that I'm putting in a little work here. So sometimes it's exposure and us educating our own brothers and those fathers to say, hey, here are some resources and information that's available externally, but here are some things that you can also do. It's not only beneficial to yourself, but to your family. And what's so interesting about this is that domestic violence is counter to these things that we're mentioning, right? We're not pouring in all of these resources into a man so he can be a stronger batterer or abuser. We're pouring in all these resources into a man so he can represent himself in the best way possible for himself and his family. Now, we talked about the social, racial unrest and the pressure that can bring, but we've also, and this is going to be for Brother Goldsboro, this next question, we're also kind of hopefully transitioning out of COVID-19 and this global pandemic that's affected not only the world, but it's our country, our state, our jurisdiction, the county. But the labor market has been adversely impacted by COVID. We knew initially there were a lot of layoffs, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics showed that persons of color were at the brunt of some of those first individuals who were being released. And so, Brother Goldsboro, how can a father who's trying to be self-sufficient, take care of his family, how can a father who's dealing with unemployment, mounting debt, first of all, how can that impact a father? You touched on it earlier, and what can they do about it to see some daylight? Because everyone knows the problems, but if this father says, okay, I'm in a bad place financially, it's creating stress, I'm lashing out at people I care about, what would you say to them, and how would you try to help that man, that father, find a path forward?
So that's an interesting question, because it's interesting because there really isn't an easy answer, and it's not a one size fits all. And by that I mean, so if, as an example, what I talk to people about all the time is things like paying yourself first, right? So if you pay yourself first, the right percentage of your income relative to what you earn, when these rainy days or difficult times happen, then in theory you have a reserve to go to so that you are under less stress when these things happen. Because in this instance, it wasn't under our control. When many of us didn't predict a pandemic, and then thus the impact of that we also didn't predict. But what we can control is our behavior before these kinds of things happen. And so the reason the question is interesting is because that didn't actually answer your question, but I'm telling you that, that's the precursor to it, right? Like we are free to make any decisions that we like, but we are not free from the consequences of those decisions. And when things like this happen, it brings everything to the forefront of, wow, I spent my money on X, Y, and Z when I could have taken some of that and put it aside for an unpredictable circumstance. So now the answer, I guess, to your question is, what do you do once you're in the situation where you have the debt and you're facing unemployment? And had some clients that have had those challenges, not just because of COVID, but over time. And one of the things I always say is, not to be quoting, sort of these old beliefs, but this too shall pass. And that's not a solution, but that hopefully helps their mindset. Quite often when you're faced with this kind of thing, the stress of, not being employed, not being able to provide for your family, and having your debt continue and the bill collectors call can be overwhelming. And so part of the solution is, how do you process that? Do you let it overwhelm you and sort of put you in a position where you can't get out of bed every day because you're so depressed by it? Or do you say, I'm in a situation, I will get through it, it's temporary, and I just have to begin to do the right things? And what are the right things? Well, one, obviously, you have to go out and look for employment right away. I think that's obvious. Some people get on unemployment, and that may be a temporary solution as well, just until you can get back on your feet. And then, once you realize that you can get through this, when you are through it, just realize, how do I not put myself in this position again? And it is all about the choices that we make. Our relationship with money matters. And as a guy, just being upfront, as a guy in my 30s who had a terrible relationship with money, as soon as I made it, I wanted to spend it. I realized the hard way that was a terrible idea. And so now when I talk to people about, the right thing to do, is I've lived it myself. I'm in the congregation, not the pulpit, right? I've lived these things. So it's really about the decisions. Going back to your original question, it's about the decisions we make when things are good that help us not be in such an awful position when things are bad, whether it was our fault or not, because we can't control things like pandemics, but we can control our behavior so that when these bad things happen, we're better prepared.
Thank you, good brother. And Dr. Simmons, you will have the you'll be the last, probably the last voice from the panel. If there's a father or a male that's listening to us, watching this live stream, and they've engaged in acts of domestic violence, and they know it's wrong and they want to change, but they don't know how, what would you say to them? I think you're on mute. Good.
Thank you, Brother Rice. I would encourage first I would applaud any male, not for the act of violence or aggression, but for the accountability, the willingness to assume responsibility. And that's always the first step to change. But then to know that there are resources out there that they can reach out to for assistance. There are programs available throughout the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area that has individual services, there's group services, there's assistance that can wrap around the individual that can help to support him through this recovery. And it's oftentimes when men are in the position, I know there's the stigma, there's the shame, there's feeling labeled, and they connect themselves to the behavior. And what I like to share with the men and the brothers is that you aren't necessarily your behavior. So you can distance yourself from the aggression and violence the same way you can distance yourself from substance abuse.
Thank you, Dr. Simmons. We have a couple more minutes as we come to a close. Brother Walker, as we move towards Father's Day, final thoughts or reflections from the panel.
I would say happy Father's Day. And I would say that if you are a victim of domestic violence, if you're listening, or if you're a perpetrator, uh, like some of the other brothers have said, take accountability, face your weaknesses, face your own hurt in the mirror, and realize that that may be the trigger for your actions. And if you can take accountability, you can change. And if you're willing to take accountability, I'll say that if you've been hurt, I'd say seek help, seek a counselor, spiritual counselor, or just close friends and family that can support you. And your situation isn't the long term um, journey. It's just a short term thing.
Thank you. Dr. Johnny Parker, final reflections.
Yeah, just thank you for having me, and want to encourage fathers. 3 things I want to encourage fathers to do: to continue as a man to be honest with yourself, be that man in the mirror, the Michael Jackson song. Secondly, to be honest with other men. I talked about this backstage. A man has to be, a father has to have other men in his backstage who have an access pass to his heart to help him become who he wants to be and stay the course. Thirdly, to be honest with God. That in our church at First Baptist that Eric attends, we have a men's ministry, and we encourage men to be men who we call it 10x better man. A man is called to live above average to the glory of God. And so we call men to be honest with self, with other men, and with God.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. Brother Goldsboro, final thoughts and reflections.
Oh, Brother Russ, first of all, thank you, and thank everyone for the opportunity, and for everyone participating. I think it's vital that we have these kinds of discussions. To me, being a father is the greatest privilege I've ever had, and there really isn't a close second. Simultaneously, it's the greatest responsibility I've ever had, and there's certainly not a close second. And so with that, and the responsibility and that comes with it, and the respect that I have for dads who are out here just trying to do the right things despite the struggles that come with life, I would just say to you that bad times happen in life. It's just part of it. But violence with the people to whom you're closest is not only not the right answer, it is the worst answer, and also produces the worst outcome. So if you lead with love, as I believe Brother Walker said earlier, if you lead with love, you have better outcomes than leading with violence. That's not some brilliant statement. That's just how life works. And to the extent that we're willing to adhere to that as a principle, I think our families will be made better for it.
Thank you, Brother Goldsboro. And it looks like we are at time. So Dr. Parker, Brother Simmons, Brother Walker, Brother Goldsboro, it's been an honor to have this dialogue with you all. I know that these conversations will continue and need to continue so that we can let men know that there are resources, there are support, and it's okay for men to come together to have meaningful conversations about sensitive issues. At this moment, I'd like to pass the baton to Brother Mandrell Burke. Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, all right. Talk about a wonderful conversation. I'm so glad. I want to give a shout out, of course, to Dr. Rice, Dr. Spencer Simmons, Dr. Johnny Parker, and Eric Walker. Also, Clarence Goldsboro. We talked about, addressing yourself, helping men to address mentally, spiritually, and financially. One point I do want to make several points. It's hard to move forward when you don't have the strength to take the step. And what we're trying to do is give you that strength. We know, as it was stated, we're dealing with, it's possible that guys can be dealing with witnessing abuse. We know guys are dealing with oppression. We know we're thinking about, am I going to get killed when I get pulled over by a police officer? We know we're worried about our families. But what we're trying to do is plant the seed so that you can emulate this conversation, this communication, and push this to your children so that they can implement the lessons that you learned. So they don't have to implement the lessons of being violent. They can implement the lessons of calling a counselor. They can implement the lessons of calling a financial planner. Yes, I know that's something new. Maybe you haven't done that, but that will help you financially. All right. We talked about service, humility, love. We talked about health. We talked about, get off that sugar. Stop eating all that sugar. We know we're suffering from diabetes, but if we take the right steps to be healthy, then we won't be having these strokes and heart attacks. We can change the narrative. But what we have to do first is change the mindset. And if we change the mindset, we can do anything. Because as I always stated, the only difference between possible and impossible is your determination. So we got to plant the seed. We got to have the conversation. This entire panel is an example of communication. This is what we have to continue to do. This is that strength for you to take the step. I know I'm adding an extra thing to your plate about taking the torch to highlight the issue of domestic abuse. That's men and women. That's not just women. All right, it's an issue for both. All right, and we have to light that torch. But we got to take care of ourselves first, mentally, spiritually, financially. All right, and then some key the service, humility, and love, all of that. And then they even talked about the kids. Meet kids. If you are a faith-based organization, get involved. Don't ignore it. Offer that listening ear. If you put all of this stuff together, all right, this is a recipe for success. And it's something that you start. You can't do everything all at once. It's not possible, but you can try. You can start to make that process. And what that does, it plants the seed. Your kid can emulate what you have been doing, and then we'll be better off. But that's what we want to continue to do. We definitely want you to check out when we go into this men's pledge. We want to recruit 1,000 men by 2022, and I think we can do it. I got to bring in something that we should always do, I believe, and celebrate the success of some accomplishments that what men have been doing, because oftentimes media don't usually work in our favor. Sometimes media likes to lean into the negative stories, and you don't see too many positive stories. So we got to pump our own selves up. So without further ado, I want to bring up Dr. Joseph Jones. He's the chair of the Prince George's County Commission on Fathers, Men and Boys. And he'll be introducing the Father's Day Award and its criteria. And it's a reason for that, because we need to celebrate why, we need to celebrate men who are doing good things so that people can see that blueprint. And when you see the blueprint, then you're able to emulate that blueprint and do something well that will affect your family and the community. That's why we're here. Talk to me, Dr. Jones.
All right. Thanks, Mandrell. Great to be here with you. As we continue to celebrate, encourage, and empower fathers during this program, the Prince George's County Commission on Fathers, Men, and Boys is pleased to announce the creation of the Fatherhood Honors Award. This award is designed to recognize, celebrate, and honor men in our community who have exemplified the principles of excellence in fatherhood through their character, service, and positive impact upon the lives of individuals, organizations, or the community. We've also partnered with Dr. James Dula and the Prince George's County Office of Veterans Affairs to include some worthy military veterans as awardees being recognized this year. I'd like to direct your attention to your viewing screen as we present the list of names of the distinguished men who have been selected to receive the 2021 Fatherhood Honors Award. On behalf of the members of the Commission on Fathers, Men, and Boys, certainly I'd like to congratulate each of the awardees. I want to thank you for your service. I want to remind everyone to get a vaccine, COVID vaccine shot if you haven't already. And I want to wish all our fathers a happy Father's Day. God bless.
Wow, how did that feel? You got an opportunity to see the media celebrate men. All right. No one killed each other. You know, no one was shooting. All right. There weren't any gangs running around fighting each other. You got an opportunity to see men was celebrating men for their achievements, for their accomplishments, for them doing what they do in the community. You know, oftentimes we don't highlight that enough, but we need to continue to do that. We need to plant the seed. We need to move forward. Now we need to celebrate. I'm going to bring my good friend Sheriff Melvin High back up, and he's going to present the Public Safety Father's Day Award. And you might have to turn your volume up. The volume is a little low, but you might have to push your volume up. And then when I come back, of course, you can bring it back down. I know you want to listen to me anyway, but we're going to bring up Sheriff High.
Well, we're here with Sergeant Richard Johnson, a member of our Prince George's County Sheriff's Office, to recognize him as a best father. Sergeant Johnson has 3 biological children that he served well, and they've grown to adulthood or their teenage years and become great citizens of our community. But in addition to that, we also recognize him as a best father because he serves as the lead for our agency in our interactions and engagement with our middle school children. And so he's mentored hundreds of young people and helped them to grow to become better citizens of our community. So it is my honor and privilege to recognize you for your contributions to the betterment of American and world society, because that betterment is dependent on the productive contributions of our next generation. And you ensure that that next generation will make great contributions. And so we will be well served by the next generation that you have fathered and mentored in their growth and development. So I have a plaque to recognize that. This plaque says, the Prince George's County Department of Family Services and the Office of the Sheriff presents the Fatherhood Public Safety Award to Sergeant Richard L. Johnson, ID number 237, in recognition of your character as a man, father, or father figure, positive impact and service to the community, and is given to you this June 17th, 2021. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Wow, congratulations. That's what I'm talking about. Now, don't we need good police officers, good male role models? We need that in our streets, all right? Because we don't want to be worried about when we step out the car, if we're going to get killed by racial profiling or just dealing with issues in our community. We want to fix our community. All right, now coming up next, of course, it's the Father's Day Pledge. It's basically a call of action. I mentioned this before. I want you to go. It's basically, we want to register 1,000 father figures, mentors, young men, and the community leaders to join us in June for 2022. And it's called a Father's Day Initiative. Now, you can do your part. Once you click on there, we want you to register. We want to get 1,000. So quarterly, we're going to try to reach out to you and tell you, okay, we have 100 men registered. A couple months later, we have 200 men registered. All right, we're going to continue to update you. So when we come to June 2022, we want to have 1,000 men here. All right. It may not be virtual, but hopefully it'll be outside or at a different event. But we want 1,000 men. All right. And I have 15 men registered already. We're starting right now. We're starting with 15 by 2022. And you could be that influential person. You could be that pastor that's listening. We want you engaged and involved. Do what you must to bring that 1,000 men together, because we got to help ourselves. We got to help ourselves. Do your part. Register, help us to get to 1,000. We'll continue to update and bring you that information. And remember, people, the only difference between possible and impossible is your determination. I'd like to thank Dr. Belon Butler for inviting me and allowing me to be the MC. I'd like to thank Jackie Roan for always being in the community and just spreading a level of hope so that we continue to know the information within our community, because we can't do it unless we help ourselves. And there's about 3 events that I need to highlight and bring to your attention so they can help you, encourage you, bring your family out. It's just something to help and push you forward that will lead you in the right direction. First up, we got the hybrid men's golf and grill. Now, we want you to join Prince George's County State's Attorney Aisha Braveboy and Principal Deputy Jason Abbott for the 3rd annual Prince George's County State's Attorney's Men event and pre-Father's Day celebration. Now, it's on June 18th, 2021 from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. But the hybrid event, which will feature a virtual grill and a meal contest, it's an in-person round of golf from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. So lock that in. It's at Woodmore Country Club. Even if you can't play golf, going out there and check it out. Now, let's move forward to June the 19th. All right. Now, on June the 19th, we got the 108 Community Organization is hosting Returning the King to His Throne. It's a virtual event. It's on June the 19th at 11 a.m. We want you to join or visit 108organization.org. All right. So those are some events. Actually, we got one more event, and that's the Fathers and Families Fun Bike Ride. All right, that's right. That's on June the 20th. It starts at 9 a.m. The location is Allen Pond in Bowie, Maryland. All right, they're going to take a 20-mile bike ride throughout the city of Bowie, Maryland. Now, if you can't ride 20 miles, they got something in there where you can participate for 3 to 5 miles for fathers and families. But get out there, be involved, be engaged, do what you need to do. But most importantly, let's take care of our families. Let's break this silence to domestic violence. Let's continue to move the if they're going to move the finish line, let's get to it. Let's move towards it. Let's not complain about it. Let's just do something, plant the seed, and keep this moving. So again, thank you, Dr. Belon Butler. Thank you, the Department, Prince George's Department, Prince George's County Department of Family Services, Jackie Roan, and just let's by June 2022, people, we want 1,000 men. You see it rotating on the bottom, as my pastor would say, Reverend Sims. Have a great day on purpose, and we look forward to seeing you on June 2022, 1,000 strong. So long, everybody.